How's it going, everyone? So I have another React challenge for you all. This one is actually really interesting, and I don't know how far I'll get due to time constraints, but I'm going to play a video. Someone in my Discord asked me if I could potentially make a video on this. Basically, it's an app where you can come in and you can add different types of Boolean logical conditions, and you have it print out true and false based on different arguments that you can dynamically put in. So if you see here, I'll pause it. He can add an argument and he can add an X, and then he can set the value of that to true or false. And then once he adds these arguments, down here, he can actually select different arguments like this. Go ahead and pause this. So after he adds the arguments, he can come in here and he can select a different type of expression to kind of use the booleans that are defined above and concatenate them with ands or ors and get the final output result. So right here, he's saying constant, and that allows him to pick either my arg, which is false, or x, which is true. So for example, he picked and now he can actually select different values in these different select boxes, right? So he can select the argument, which would be one of these things, or he could just do a constant if he wants. Once he does that, he's able to modify the arguments, and you'll see that the result down here actually switches from true to false. So basically, it's like kind of doing a bunch of Boolean logic in React, but a nice UI to allow you to verify results. So if you see here, it gets even more complex. This is like a nested or an and setup right here. So this is going to be an actual hard challenge, which I do think you should try to do yourself if you are interested in becoming better at React or web development. But let's just go ahead and get started and see how far we can get. So the first thing you need to do, we kind of break this down into two separate problems, right? The first problem is there a way to basically just define a section where you can add arguments and keep track of those arguments' values? This one should be pretty straightforward. I mean, it's probably like an array in React, and you just push on values to this array, and you can change the name or the value dynamically. So I'm going to start in this part, and then we'll move on to the other parts. And again, always try to keep it all in one component, and then you can extract and abstract away later on. So let's just go ahead and make an arguments array. I'll say set arguments equals use state. Make it equal to an empty array. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to make a type here called argument. That's going to have a name, which could be a string, and it's also going to have a value, which could be it's going to need to be a Boolean, right? And what we want to do is we want to loop over all the arguments that the user has and basically display some type of input box, and then also display a drop down that they can select true or false for. Okay, so let's just go ahead and do that. I will do a UL, and then I'll say LI, and we're actually going to dynamically loop over this. So let's make a map. I'll say arguments.map argument. Go ahead and do that. And I will say key argument dot name for right now. You always want to put a key on the things that you're dynamically looping over so that React knows how to update them later. But once we've done that, what we can do is we can simply make an input box like this, and then we can also put a select, and we probably need two options. We'll say option value could be true. Let's do the same thing for false. And then also on the input, we could say value is equal to argument dot value. And we probably need to add like an on change as well. So let's figure out why this is complaining. So in TypeScript, we didn't type this use state array. So we should probably come up here and say argument array is what we're storing in state. So now that we hover over this, we actually get arguments back. This is also complaining because I put curly braces here, and I just want to do an implicit return. Let's just go ahead and delete some stuff. And now also this is complaining because the input requires an actual, oh, let me change this to, instead of value, let's do name. Name is what we're displaying in the actual input. For the select, we're going to have to add logic to basically change the value of this argument to true and false as we select it. I believe I can do an on change here, and I could basically say e.target value. We want to do something with that value. So if they select true or they select false, we want to basically modify what the on change was. Now I don't know if I need to put this on the select. Yeah, I think I put it on the select. But let's just try to make a function, and I'll say function change argument value. This, I'll say const new value. Actually, we'll make this a Boolean. And we also need the name of the argument. So I'll say like argument name or the index. We could also do the index here if that makes sense, but probably the name would be better. So again, let's just slow down. What are we doing? So when we change the select input, we need to update the current argument that we're looking at to a new value. Okay. Let's go ahead and call this, and we'll say argument.name, and then we'll say value. And what we could do is verify if this is equal to the string of true, then this whole thing will be true. Remember, we typed this as a Boolean, so we need to make sure we pass it a Boolean. And let's just verify what we're doing actually works. So I'm going to print out argument name and new value, because we've written a lot of code and we haven't tested any of it yet. So I don't know if this stuff is even going to work. Let's go back to code. The value used to arguments. This might be a reserved keyword actually. So let's do a F2, rename that to args. And let's rename this to set args. Okay, I think arguments you can use in an actual function. So we probably should not use that name. So what we want to do is nothing shows up. So let's get our Chrome debugger going. But more specifically, let's go to our React components. And our array is empty, so let's just go ahead and add one. I'll say name is like my Boolean, and then value is false. I'll do the same thing for the true. I want to make sure both of these work as expected. Go over here, name it like that. Okay, so what we want to do is I'm going to click on app here, and I want to view the state and make sure that the state gets modified properly as you select different things. So I will say that this is not getting updated to the proper value. This is supposed to be false because false is over here, but we're not updating that correctly. So we should probably go over here and figure out how to put that. I think you could just say value here, and then I will say argument.value maybe. Now this says it needs a string, right? So we should probably, again, do a triple equals to true here. Oh, I'm sorry, we don't need a triple. We need to basically concatenate this with a string. So I could just do some string interpolation to force that to be a string, and hopefully that makes it happy. And now you notice that it says false here, and if I were to change this, I want you to keep track of what happens to this value here. It's supposed to become true. So if I do this and hit true, it doesn't do anything because I don't think I even implemented that logic. Instead, I'm getting ahead of myself. What we're supposed to be doing is looking for this console log. And it does log out. So if you see here, it says my Boolean true. We did get a warning though. You provided value props in the form field without an on change handler. I think, is that old? I have an on change and a value here. I'm not really sure what it's complaining about. Oh, I think it's complaining about the input. We'll fix this in a bit. So over here, if you click on true, it does print out, but we're not updating state as we saw over here. So we need to make sure that if you go to the components view, we need to update the state. So how can you update the state? Well, we have to basically loop through all of our args and update the one argument that has the same name as the one that we passed in and update the value to the new value. So we have to basically say set args, and I'll say previous args like this. And we're going to make a loop here. Actually, we're going to return a map. I'll say previous args.map, say arg. And we're going to basically do this. We're going to say if the arg.name is equal to argument.name. So the one passed in, if those are equal, what we're going to do is we're going to return a new type of object here. And I will say arg, and then I'll say value is equal to new value. So basically loop through the array, and if you find this one that matches the name, just update the value. Otherwise, we want to just return the previous arg. And I think that should be all we need. Let me go ahead and figure out where I have some type of parentheses left over. There we go. And if you don't like using the explicit return, you could just go ahead and delete that if you want. It sometimes makes the code easier to understand, and sometimes it makes it harder to understand. It kind of depends on what you want to do. But I think this looks okay. So now we want to verify. If we go in and we change this, does it update state? And it does. You see the value over here got toggled to true and false. Awesome. So now we got to do the same thing with the input, because when you type in here, it doesn't actually update the argument here. Now that I think about it, the fact that we can update name is probably going to make this React confused because we used that as the key. So I am just going to put the index here. I know it's not the best practice. I think a better approach would be like when you create these arguments, give them unique IDs, which we could potentially do. Like we could just say like 1, 2, 3, and this one could be ID of ABC. This would probably be the better way to do it. So like instead of doing the index, if you want to do this properly, you should probably assign unique IDs to all your data. So that'll make it work better in the future when we add the update ability. So let's go ahead and add another function. So when someone changes this input, we want to update the name. All right, so I'll make another function here, and I'll say function update argument name, and then I will say argument ID, and then I'll also do new name dot string. Okay, and we need to do the exact same thing here, which basically we have to loop through all the arguments. We have to find the one that matches the argument ID, and then we're going to go ahead and say name is equal to new name. Okay, a little bit better. And in fact, if you wanted to use something like Emmer, it would make this code a lot cleaner, I believe. This is one thing I do not like about React. It's just so verbose to do something simple. Like if we had the reference to the argument, we could just change the name. So like something like Vue or Svelte, this would be so much more elegant, but it is what it is. So let's just go here and say on change. We want to call this function here. So I'll say e, and they'll say call this function, and we want to do argument.id, and then we want to say e.target.value. Now we do need to modify this one to probably take in an ID as well. So I'm just gonna go ahead and change this to argument ID. We'll say this, and then we'll say argument ID here, just so that the interface matches for those two functions, and we're gonna pass an ID here. Okay, so at this point, let's check, are we doing this correct? If I type into here, we should see state update for this. Like that. Okay, so I think we're good. We have the input boxes and the check boxes all working. Let us look at the next part is, I think we need to create this thing where I'm going to keep it as simple as possible. I'm going to allow you to select an and or an or. That's it. Let's look over at the next part. This is going to be the most challenging part of this React challenge. And basically we need another select dropdown, which has, I guess we'll just keep it 3 arguments. I believe in his video he has 4. So we want to be able to select and, or you can select a value, like an argument. Okay, so let's just go ahead and copy this. And we are going to make a new select element here. And let's think about what we need to do. So if you look at the UI, what is the data that we're dealing with, right? We have some type of recursive data structure, it seems like. Because if you see this nesting, this is usually a telltale sign that you need some type of recursive data structure where you have an object that stores a reference to an object. At least in my head, that's how I think about it. And we have a button called add opt, which basically gets added to every single like recursive data structure object. So let's just go ahead and up here. The way I think about this is we need another array potentially called condition. Now I'm just trying to go off the top of my head of how we do this, but I could potentially implement a wrong solution. We'll have to come back and fix it. But I think if we start with a condition, well, I guess we should call it op, like operation, because that's what they call it. So I'll say operation. And then going back here, you can select, yeah, let's just do this. I'm gonna say an operation has a operand And that could be an or an and. Wait, let's do this. There we go. So an or an and inside the operand, it has. Wait, is an operand the one that's the or and, or is that the operator? Operator. Or and. I might have this backwards, but I think we need to do operand A. This is going to be a Boolean. Okay, so if I do this incorrectly, let me know in the comments. I think the operator is the or the and the operands are the things that you're like applying the logic to. So let's go over here. I'm going to go ahead and say const operations is equal to set operations. And we want to say use state of, I want to say this is going to be, actually an operation. And we're going to set it as a default. We're going to go ahead and say operator is going to be or. And for right now, we'll say operand A is going to be equal to this ID of 1, 2, 3. So we'll say 1, 2, 3. And then operand B is going to be ABC. Okay, so basically we're setting up an equation where we're doing an or statement, and then we're providing it ABC and 1, 2, 3, which are the IDs for the arguments. Okay. Now the issue is that an operand, and I think about it, could be potentially a string, because the way this is set up, this actually needs to be the key. So I'm going to say string, or it could be an operation again. Okay. So this is like how the recursive structure comes into play. You have an operation and its children can store another operation. So now it's getting a little bit complex, but we're going to figure this out. I think these two functions are done, so let's just minimize them so they're not bothering us anymore. But let's loop over the operations, and we need to do some additional stuff. So I'll do a map here. I'll say operation, and we want to basically return that select. And actually, so what we want to do is whenever you have like recursive data structures, it makes sense to pull out into a recursive component. So up here, I might actually make another function called operation like this. And this is going to be a JSX component, which is going to return, just do a div right now and paste in that information. And we're going to come down here and we're actually going to delete this code. And instead, we're going to say operation like this. And what we need to do is pass it the very first operation. So I think what we should do, pass it operations. So I will say operation is equal to operation. So it's getting kind of confusing. I might rename operation to root operation because we're dealing with like a tree at this point. So I might rename it to root operation and probably set root operation. Okay. Now this thing should take in a props. They should probably take in the operation node that you're kind of working on. So I'll just go ahead and do this. The operation is an operation. Okay. And what we want to do here is we want to display a select box for the type. So I'll just go ahead and say we want to do operation.type. Okay, this is already a string, I believe, so we don't need to do that. Actually, why is this complaint? Oh, it's called operator. Operator. Here we go. And then when you select this type, we want to basically, we want this to be a an or an and. Okay. And then we should probably just this. And we want to say change operation type. And this is where it's going to get very confusing, because in React, in order to update a recursive structure, you're going to have to basically dive down that recursive structure, and it's just going to get really messy. I kind of wonder if maybe a better way is to have two different state two different pieces of state that we're storing. One could be like the recursive structure of the tree, and the other one could be a separate like lookup table for the ID of the operation, and then that can basically be used to just update it. I don't know if I explained that correctly. If that made sense, but basically the idea is we need to make a function here. So let's just do function, change operation type. This needs to take in the like an ID of the operation, which we don't even have. So we'll have to figure that out. And then also it needs to take in a new type, which would be a I'll say operation.operator. I'm going to pull this out. I'm going to say type operators is equal to this. And we're going to go ahead and do that so that we can basically type this over here. And this actually needs to be operation ID is a string. Okay, so basically we want to call this function. And this needs to be the operation ID, which we don't even have defined here. So I'm going to go ahead and add one. But then also we want to provide the string of the value here, which this is complaining. I think you can probably just say as operator here, and that would that fix it? Operators. I don't know if that's the proper TypeScript fix, but I think this should work. So the issue with this is that in order to update this operations operator, we have to basically expose some type of function here, which now that I think about it, the state of all the operators will be stored here. So like we probably should pass in that function that I'm talking about. So I'll say change operation type. This will be a function. We will do this. I'm just going to say inif right now because I'm lazy. And we're going to cut this function out. And we're going to actually declare it at a higher level so that we have access to it. This one's complaining because we don't have an ID on here. I'll just go ahead and give it like an ID of 1. But the idea, at least for what I think we could do that would make this a lot easier, is we want to store all these things. We want to store those also in a map. Okay. So I'm going to say operations, and then we'll also say set operations. Like this. And we're going to say use state. And this is going to be a record of IDs. So I'll say string, and then I'll say operation. And then this will store a empty array for right now. So what is this complaining about? It's complaining because I didn't give it the bracket. So what am I trying to do here? Again, I have two data structures. One is keeping track of the recursive tree structure, but the other one is keeping track of the actual like mapping the ID. So like here, you'd basically store the same object here. And again, I don't know if this is going to work, but I'm just trying it live and I'll refactor if it doesn't work. So what we want to do is these things. This is going to be either an operand ID or this is going to be an operation ID. So instead of it storing an operation, it's just going to be a string. But how would we know? Okay, so this is going to get a little hacky. I'm actually going to refactor this and I'm going to change this to a operand like this. Okay, I'm just going to prefix it so I know if it's either an operand or if it's an operation. Probably not the best approach. There might be a better way to do this. I could probably store an object on this that has a type, but I'm just doing the hackiest thing I could think of. So now this thing doesn't actually store the values of the operands. All it does is it stores references to the operands or the operations. And technically we don't need the operator here. You know, at this point, I'm just confusing myself. I don't know what I'm doing, but let's just figure this out. So basically, when you try to update the operation, we want to basically update this value here. Let's say set operations, and then I'll say previous operations, and we're going to basically return, let's just return a new object that has all the other operations. So I'll say like previous operations, but then also we want to basically update the operation ID to have the expected data. I think what we could do is we could do a spread operator, and I could say operation ID, and then we could just go ahead and say ... previous operations. So, and then I'll say operation ID, but then we need to update the type. So I'll say type is operator dot new operator. New operator. All right, so this is crazy. Let's go ahead and figure out. I added all this stuff, but we don't even have a way to change the operation type. I think we need to basically pass this in now. Change operation type. We declared this function, but we're not using it, so we need to make sure we pass it in here, like that. And now, at the very least, what this should display is we need to basically have it recursively loop over the operation. Okay, so like here, we have it displaying the type, which you can modify, but then you also need to display, depending on if the operation.operand A, if it starts with, this is where the appending prefix comes into play. If this thing starts with operand, then what we could do is we could just display a select box, or not a select box. We want to, what do we want to display? Yeah, we need to display a select box. This is a hard challenge. I hope this wasn't for a junior interview challenge. So we want to select a select box for all the operands. So like we're going to have to basically where do we even store the operands? I'm so confused now. Args. Oh, we call them args. Maybe we should rename this to operands. Operands. And this could be set operands. Okay, so we need to pass this into our component so we have access to it, like that. And then we're going to go up here and we're going to also take in the operands, which, what do we call those? These are called arguments. Okay, we should probably rename this as well to operand. Okay, so we loop over the operands that come in, or I'm sorry, we for the operation, we check if it starts with an operand, then we basically show a select, but we need to dynamically render out every single operand here. So operands.map, this is an operand, and then we need to show options like this, and the value is going to be operand, and this is also going to be an operand. Why is this complaining? Operand dot, this would be name. Actually, this needs to be ID. This probably needs a key on it. Say operand dot ID. Why is this complaining? Okay, so if it starts with operand, then we display the list of operands that they can select from. Otherwise, I'm going to just display null for right now because I've written so much code and I haven't tested any of it. I'm kind of worried this is going to be completely broken. Let's look over here. So we have or and we have and. That kind of works. But we want to display both of the operands. So we need to do the same logic again. And I know I'm copying, pasting code everywhere, so this is getting really messy. But I want to just verify, does this actually work? And we're going to put some break statements here because I'm getting burned out. So let's just go ahead and do the simplest thing I can think of. Okay, let's focus on this. Like I can't actually change the operation type for some reason. That's not working. So let's try to figure that out. We have a function change operation type, takes in an operator ID, and then it takes in a new value. And now that I think about it, it's probably because the thing we're passing to operation is that recursive data structure. But what we actually need to do is look up the operations, which you're not even passing here. So let's go down here and we're going to pass in operations. Okay, this thing needs to be passed in as a property. And this is going to be a record. Remember that record we made where it's a string and then we have an operation? This is kind of what we need to do. But then instead of just using this operator here, or this operation, we need to actually look up based on the ID and get the operator. Where I'm so confused right now. Okay, so this is the select box that shows the or, the and. We need to set the value based on the current operation ID that we're at. Like that. That needs to take the operator that we have set. Let's try this. And there. Cool. So okay, we're going to keep this simple. Let's take the two values here, and I want to, first of all, figure out why they both say my Boolean, because one of them is supposed to say other Boolean, I believe. So let's go back to our C data. It's because why is this because? So this takes in the operands, takes in the root operation, which is this thing. That thing takes in an operator, which is what we're updating properly, I think, which is stored here. In fact, I don't think we need to store it on this thing. I think we just need to say it's an operation node. Go back up here a little bit. We're going to make another type called operation node, and that's going to have an ID of a string. And then we're going to have a operand A, which would be a string, and then operand B, which would be a string. And let's update this one. This needs to be operations, I think needs to be an operation node. The TypeScript is not complaining about this. Okay. And down here, we have to basically, this needs to take the operation ID and do like the same thing we did before. So I'll say like operations dot operation ID dot operand. I'll say operand B. This needs to be operand A. Oh wait, wrong one. Okay, so this is the A, because we're doing this one. So this needs to be operand A. But then this needs to be operand A. That's the ID. But then this needs to be the value. I think this needs to be operands. My gosh, I'm so confused. Operations operand. I think this needs to be operations. This needs to be the operation ID. This needs to be the operand A. But this is the actual ID and not the operand. So we have to loop through this and get the operand. So we should probably make a function that hits that operand. Let's go here. I'm going to say function get operand. That takes in a operand ID. And then this needs to return operands dot find. And then I want to get the one operand ID is equal to operand ID. And I need to call this here. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and do this. And I'm going to say if there is no operand, I'm just going to throw an error, throw new error, GG. No operand found of with that ID of, and then I'll just go ahead and concatenate that with the operand ID and return it. So we know that this thing returns a defined thing every time. Okay, let's go here, and I want to basically get the operand based on the operand ID, which would be this. And then we want to get the value here. But it's saying I can't use a boolean, so I'm just going to concatenate that with a string and wish for the best. And then we're going to do the same thing here with B. Let's figure out what I broke. No operand found with that ID of operand 123. So it's trying to look up operand 123. And what I need to do is probably say operand 123. Okay, let's refresh. Again, it's still showing my boolean here. Why is this showing my boolean? It should be showing this one. So we have this one, this is A, this one is B, this one looks up B and gets the value of it. Oh, I know why. So we need to use the same function to display the name. So we have to do like this as well. And then we have to basically do it here. This will be A. There we go. So if I type hello here, that updates, and I can actually select different ones. Although the options I have are like duplicated for some reason. We will have to figure that out. That's kind of weird. Why is that happening? Why is that operands.map? I think it's probably because the ID, the value is the same. I think I need to do the same thing here. Okay, now this is getting really confusing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull these out. I'll say const operand A is equal to this, and that's going to be called an operand. Do the same thing for operand B, just so that it's not like super confusing, because right now I keep on getting confused. So let's just do this. I will say value plus that, and then this will be that dot name. Okay, so the code's a little bit cleaner now, and then we'll do the same thing here. We will do operand B. Actually, I can't do that. At this point, I'm so confused. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I know what I'm doing, but I can't figure out the path to get there easily. Again, it's showing, when I click on this thing, it's showing like the same two things. But I think what we want to do is the value of this thing needs to be like this. This probably needs to be dot value. or I'm sorry, this probably needs to be, if operation operand A starts with operand, then we show a select, which we do, but then the values inside those things, the options, for some reason, those things are getting like duplicated. Because I don't want to get the operand. I want to loop over every operand, and I want to get the operand based on the value or the ID.name. Is that right? Okay, I think that's actually better. Whew, that was confusing. Let's do the same thing over here. I would do this. Now the value here should probably also be dynamic. So I have to do a get here. That would have to be a plus, make it become happy. Then we'll do the same thing over here. At this point, I would probably definitely recommend splitting this whole thing out into a component, because we are duplicating code basically in both areas, but I don't want to confuse myself even more than I am. Okay, so let's make sure. This thing, when I refresh the page, this one should have started with other Boolean. Okay, so if we look at this, this thing should be looking at the operation ID. It should get all the operations and get operand B, and then get the value of it. This probably needs to say value in here. Probably this needs to say value too. Actually, I think this needs to say ID. Wait, maybe this does just need to be operand ID. Okay, let's take a step back. The issue is one of these Dropbox, one of these things is not being set to the proper value. Now, I don't know if that's a state issue. If you look here, we have state. This one, I mean, the state looks fine. Just that this drop down here, where we are trying to show we're trying to make this one be selected with other Boolean, because that's what it's supposed to be. So let's try to figure this out. I think first of all, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the value after this, just so we have like more context, because I'm not able to like visualize what I need here. So like, I think I need to do this, and let's just go ahead and put the value out here so that like I can actually get more understanding of what's going on. Okay, so this one's true. We're going to do the same thing over here. We'll put a fragment. We are going to basically do operand A. Okay. So the values are linking up properly. That's cool. But the name inside of the dropdown is not. Now, I don't understand why. Because we basically say the value of the select is going to be equal to the value of what you have selected for that operation operand B. So in this case, this thing should be oh, we don't need to put value here. This needs to be just the ID, right? Maybe that's the issue. There we go. Okay, so let's do the same thing up here. This just needs to be ID, and we don't need to plus string here because like it's already a string. Ooh, okay, now if I switch these, that doesn't work. Now, why doesn't that work? Because we probably have a bug here. Change operation type. So this thing needs to, or changing the value, which would be the ID. New operation. I think this just needs to be an operation ID. Change operation type. Oh, okay, so I think we need another select for changing the operand. So let's just say change option, change operation operand. We'll just do any again because why not? I don't know if I'm gonna be able to solve this. This is a very hard, very, very hard challenge. Probably the hardest challenge I've ever done on this channel, to be honest. Maybe I should have planned a little bit more, but again, like this is supposed to be a live interview experience. So if someone were to ask me this in an interview, like I have to solve it live. But I want to basically make another function here that allows you to take in an operation ID, and then it takes in a operand is operand A, and then we'll say operand ID, which is a string. So we want to basically set the operands, or set the operations, but we want to update the, what do we want to update? I'm going to say if is operand A. We're going to go ahead and say operand A, otherwise we'll say operand B, and then we're going to allow you to change the operand ID like this. And let's use this. So let's pass this in to our nested child. And we are going to basically use it inside of those little things here. Let's just pass it here, pass it here. And what we need to do is we need to pass in a couple of things, which unfortunately I didn't type these. I put any because I'm dumb, but I think you need to take the operation ID, and then you need to take an is operand A. I'll say true. And then I need to say which one that you're selecting, which I think I just do that. Let's try it again. And what I'm also going to do is I'm going to add one more here. I'm going to add one more operand called operand 4. I'll say testing. This will be a false. So what that allows us to do is you can select this one, and I should see it here. If I select testing, it becomes false. One could be false as well. And it's selecting the wrong one. I think because I copied and pasted. So let's change that true to a false so that it keeps track. Let's refresh the page. I'm going to set this one to testing. There we go. All right, this is insane. Let's just try to get like the value. So I want to run some computation over the selected things you have and just display like a final result here. So I'm going to go ahead and just make a function called, I don't know, calculate final Boolean. And that needs to basically just be a computed that needs to recursively run all these things. So like this needs to take in an operation, probably an operation node. And we need to basically say if, let's get the operation. I'll say operation ID. I'll say if operation dot, oh, this needs to be operations of the ID. And this needs to be dot, yeah, I'll do if operator is equal to and then we'll say else, we'll do something else. And then we're going to go ahead and say return operands, operation, operand A, ampersand, operands, operation, operand B, dot value, dot value. Okay, so the issue is that like this is not a map, so I can't just look it up that way. I have to use this like helper function, which I'm not a fan of copying and pasting this, but I'm going to copy and paste it because I've been going on for like an hour now and I do not want to be coding on this anymore. But I do want to try to like finish this, right? So let's go ahead and just call it here. Does that make sense? So basically I'm using that function to loop over the array and get the operand by A. If I had more time, I would refactor this to be a map. I just know that's going to take me another like 10, 15 minutes. I'm not going to do that. So if it's an and, we probably need to actually do this. And if it's an or, we should do or. I know this isn't 100% done yet because I'd have to like recursively call it again, but baby steps, right? And the idea is after you do all this, I'm going to say result is this. Calculate final boolean. Oh, this needs to take in your operation node. So I'll just say root operation. And let's make sure this works. Oh, I probably need to concatenate that with a string. Okay, so if we have false, and if I select false here, the and is going to be false. If I select other boolean and other boolean, that's true. If I do an or, okay, so I think that works. Now what we need to do is we need to basically make this data structure even more nested, and then add the recursion onto it. So how do I do that? This, if it's an operand, yeah, I think I'm going to do this. I'm going to say operation like that. And we want to basically say operation 2 here. You know, now that I think about this, I think this needs to be like probably an object, which would have operation node. It could be a string or it could be another operation node, I think. Let's see if this is taking us in the right direction. This could have an ID of 2. And this could have a operand A, which would be operand ABC, whatever. This could be operand B. This could be operand 1, 2, 3. Or just call it 4, whatever. So the idea is like we've changed the structure of this a little bit. So we need to actually say if this is a string, which I think you can just say like instance of string. Or is it type of? Maybe it's type of this equal to string. I think that's how you do it. I don't remember anymore. Let's do this. So if it's a string, we know that it has to be an operand. If it's not, then it's probably going to be an operator. Let's try this and let's see what happens. Definitely messed up. It says it's an object. Okay, yeah, this should be good, right? Because we changed the C data. And this is an object now. So I think we just need another case here to say if it's an object, which we had the ternary set up for this. And what we need to do if it's an object is we have to render out operation, which is a recursion on itself. And we'll need to say, I'm going to pass in all these things. What other things do we need? Change operation type. Okay. We need to do operands. We need to pass in operation, which we'll figure out. And then we need to pass in operations like this. Okay, so the only thing is the operation needs to be a different node, which we can just pass in the operation that we have here, I think. Because we know, oh, we could do operand A. Okay. All right, so same idea. We're gonna do the same idea down here below, and we're gonna copy this in. And we'll do operand B in this case. And let's look at our code. Let's see what's broken. Cannot read property of undefined reading operator. Well, that's going to be hard to debug. So this one, let's make sure our C data is good. I think what happens, I added another operation and I didn't put it in this lookup table. So now we need to make sure we have one, and I will do this. And also what I'm going to do is on this entire thing, I'm going to give this a style. And I'll say margin left, or I guess do padding left, and I will say 100 pixels. I want to be able to like get the indentation going. It looks a little ugly right now, but why is that not doing that? Maybe 50 pixels. I don't know. I'm trying to indent this, but at this point, like, okay. So there's an or, and the or is going to be a combination of the ands and then this external thing. I know the styling is just ugly, but I'm not going to waste time trying to figure that out. So is this thing even working? Can I change this? So if this is an or, and I make this one a false, and then I make this a true, that should have made this and a true, and then that should have made this whole thing a true. So it's not truly working yet. And I think it's not working because of a couple of reasons. I also think that we might have to update the tree as we're changing things as well. I don't think we even need to store these. Are we using these? We might not even be storing these. Like, I think just the fact that this has to be some random string defined, like I could just go ahead and put whatever I want in here. Maybe not a 0. I'll just say like underscore. Let me just try this. Is this actually cause anything to break? It might not. Okay. So let's go back. Let's go back to, we have this like recursive call that we're doing to calculate if it should be true or false. So let's figure out where we're doing that and, because at this point I don't remember. Okay, it's here. I think what we're going to do is we want to say if the node we're looking at, if it's a string, so here I can say like if operation node dot operand, it's a type of equal to string, then we could basically just get the value of this thing. Otherwise, we're going to have to we're going to have to recursively call this again with operand A, which potentially could be a node. So if this thing's a string, then operand A will be a string. Otherwise, it should not be a string. It should be an object, right? I just wrap this whole thing right here. And I'll just say this is going to be an operation node. Wait, I'm confused. Why is this saying that it's a string? Oh, okay. This is why I use TypeScript. So I think I need to do this. It operand is going to be the operation node of. Okay, so if it's a string, we look up the operand using the ID. This is actually ID. Otherwise, we recursively call this, and then we're going to do like this logic. We're going to do this one more time. So I might make a function called a get value, and that's going to return this. And then we could basically just say get value of the property. We'll say property here, and this is going to be a string, and we're going to go ahead and just, this could be operand A, or this could be operand B. How about that? And this thing needs to take in You know what? Let me just, I'm going to hack this. I'm just going to get this working. I've run out of steam. I need to actually like do other stuff. So let's just change this a little bit. Say operand B. Let's just wish me luck. Let's see if this works. So if I change this thing to false and I change this to true, the whole thing should have become true, but it's not, which sucks. Well, I do have an error here. Simplicity has a return of any because it doesn't have a return annotation. At this point, I don't know what to do. I'll add a debugger and see if that helps me figure out what's going on, because I'm just lost. So if you step through here, we have operation node, which is 1. Operand is an object. Operand B is nothing. Oh, wait. Maybe that's the issue. Operand B is a string. Operation. Yeah, I think it's fine. So step through, we got 1, which is operand 1, 2, 3, and 4, and it's an OR. And then we check, since it's an OR, oh, here's the issue. That needs to be an OR. This is what happens when you copy and paste code. Let's try this out. So this will be true if this is false. Okay, that's still not working. This sucks. Let's do this. Debugger. We got the operation. It's an OR. That should recursively dive into let me think about what I'm doing here. Operator, operand A and B, or. So if it's an or, oh. Yeah, okay, this is, I think I'm just copying and pasting too much. I think I needed the exact same logic for the other one, right? Because this could potentially be recursive too. So let's go ahead and rename this one to B. Go ahead and do this. This code is so messy. All I'm trying to do is like, if this thing is an and I set this to true, yes, I think it's working. Finally. Okay, so this false changes the or, that should be true. Change that to false. Okay. I think this is actually working good. Now, if I go over here and change testing to true, it makes it true. Although, did it just change everything else? Oh yeah, because this is set to testing too. Okay, I think I'm basically there. I mean, now the next steps would be adding an X to delete operations, which, man, I don't know if I want to even do that right now. Will it be easy to do? Because what I have to do is I basically need to like restructure the tree and set the thing to null when I delete it. Which, I mean, it's just basic tree manipulation where you traverse the tree and rebuild it, omitting something. But since this is React and like nothing's easy when it comes to mutating state in React, I can't just change a reference, right? It'd be nice if I could have a function called getNode, traverses a tree, finds a node, and I can just set its operand A or B to like not be defined. Okay, I think I should just do this. I'm already like invested, right? Now add operation. I could also work on that too, where basically if you do an add operation, it needs to push a unique ID into this thing, but then it also needs to, depending on where you clicked on add operation. Yeah, this throws like a whole wrench into everything because now it's like you can have an array of operators. It's not just a tree. Like this thing would have to be, all right, I'll be honest, I'm going to give up now because I can foresee the amount of work needed to do the add operation and also to add the X is just a phenomenal amount of work for a YouTube video. And I got to drop here soon. So I think if I were to just think out loud, how would I add the add op? Well, basically, I think I need to restructure all my code, and an operation node would actually take in a list of operations. Right, so this would have to be a list of operation nodes, I believe. If I'm thinking about this correctly, because you can continue adding on more and more operations to the operation node, and basically you'd have to like dive through and run that logic over like all the different ands and ors. This whole data structure, like all my data structure would actually have to change quite a bit to add support for that, which would cause a lot of this logic to change, which I'm not willing to do. Regardless, if you're trying to learn React and become better as a web developer and like test your knowledge, I would say try to solve this problem. Hopefully I explained it well enough to give you a roadmap of like how to explain it. I'm sorry, how to solve it. Like always, I have a Discord channel you're welcome to join if you want to talk to me directly or just find a place to hang out with some other developers or get some help. Have a good day. Happy coding.